Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of our social psychology unit. As you can tell, I'm trying to condense our PowerPoints because I know internet accessibility may be an issue for some of us, and I will also try to condense the videos as well. I thoroughly enjoy this topic and I could probably talk about it for hours and hours and hours, but I'm going to try to keep it at least, or at most 20 minutes, so 2 10-minute videos. Hopefully it won't be longer than that. We'll be able to understand the concepts without me drowning on and on. Now, if you would like to engage in a conversation about persuasion and persuasion methods and tactics and all these other factors that relate to it, just send me an email or we can video chat. I would be more than happy to discuss it with you. So let us begin with persuasion, so easily fooled. So with our learning objectives, what we're going to look at today and what I really want you to kind of take home with you are the foundational concepts that are going to help you understand how we may be directed to behaving or developing attitudes in a certain way. With persuasion, we're going to talk about central and peripheral routes of persuasion. So, as you know and have experienced through life, there are different ways people try to get you to do things, right? Or to change your mind. We're going to look at what are those two general routes and what they consist of. Because there's a lot of analysis that actually goes on in how you assess other people and yourself and how other people think you're going to take their message versus how you think you should deliver your message. This is a lot of what we're building on, talking about that social cognition and analyzing the self and how we relate to others in that social realm. We're also going to look at different trigger features, fixed action patterns. That's going to be very brief, but what I want to focus on are the heuristics and the tactics of persuasion that are used on us. And we're going to see how we can kind of recognize these tactics, because even though we always talk about consciousness, how much effort, how much cognitive effort are we exerting to try to maybe diffuse some of those tactics someone's using against us, or maybe recognize when we're being lured in with a different persuasive method. We're going to see how we can use that knowledge to make us less susceptible to unwanted persuasion. So just have that understanding that yes, we are vulnerable at times, but how can we recognize these things? How can we inoculate ourselves on some level from these persuasive methods? So persuasion, as we're going to use it, is going to be the process by which excuse me, I'm not going to cut that. The process by which a message induces change in your beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors. So remember, your attitudes are your judgments of something. Those are the assessments we talked about in the last section. Our beliefs, think of the beliefs as like a standard. I think dogs are big. That's a really weird belief, but we're throwing it out there. Now, an attitude is how you give judgment to that belief. A belief is kind of more objective. Whereas the attitude that surrounds the belief, it's what's going to give it a charge. I don't like big dogs, so maybe you don't like dogs, right? That's an attitude. And your behavior is just going to be the change in what you are doing. So all of these different realms can be affected by persuasion, right? And this is one of the most studied psychological phenomena, and because whatever the content is going to cover, there is going to be similarity in the persuasion process. At its root, if we were comparing an educational lecture, such as mine, versus some evil genius mind control cult leader, we can use the same foundational social psychological principles to pick apart my lecture versus a cult leader. I know, it's super exciting. So what we're going to look at then are routes of persuasion. Now when we look at the routes of persuasion, I thought this image best encapsulated all of the elements that we're looking for. So we're going to start with a persuasive message, whatever that message is. I'm going to give you examples, but I'm just going to start with the general for now, so we have the concepts and then we will apply them. So think of your persuasive message, whatever it is. A central route is going to the center. It's going straight to the point. It is going to be very motivated and analytical. It's trying to focus on the objective content of the message. Because the person delivering that message thinks that the audience is going to exert a high effort and evaluate the message. So they are focused on delivering sound content. For example, when I give you content in a class, I try to come at you through the central route of persuasion because I have an expectation that you as my audience are motivated and analytical. You are going to put forth high cognitive effort to evaluate what I'm saying. And I'm hoping that in what I'm saying and how you're processing this information is going to have a lasting change in attitude. So that central route to persuasion is going to be much more durable than the peripheral route. Okay? So the peripheral route, on the other hand, we talk about the periphery, think of the sidelines. These are going to be your messages that are very vague, very generalized. They're going to focus on things such as fear, emotions, and other emotions and key words. To use a commonly used example, fake news, right? This is a term that we've heard a lot as of late. That is a very peripheral route to persuasion, trying to draw up some negative connotation and negative feelings, right? So this peripheral, oh my goodness, I'm having trouble saying that word, excuse me. This peripheral route is not motivated, not analytical. It's focusing again on those feelings and not so much the content of the message, but those emotional cues. Because the person delivering that message thinks that the audience receiving it is going to put forth low effort. They say, why should I put out this direct content if they're just going to focus on these emotionally charged words anyway? So they think that this audience will be persuaded by those cues outside of the message itself. So sometimes people use keywords in political speeches. Those are going to be peripheral routes of persuasion because they're meant to inspire and conjure up all this imagery and feel-good notions, right? So have that temporary change in attitude. So make sure you know the difference between the central route and the peripheral route to persuasion because those are going to be varied based on the audience and based on the person delivering the message and the content of the message. For example, if someone were giving a lecture on climate change to a group of 5-year-olds, they may decide to go with the peripheral route, right? They're trying to teach these children basic scientific knowledge. They're not exactly analytical to the level that, one would be in a college setting. And so they're trying to produce this temporary change by introducing these children to different topics. So they're going to use different cues that relate to the child's rudimentary logic. A central route to understanding environmental change and climate change would be focused maybe in one of your environmental science classrooms at Beaufort County Community College, right? They expect you to be motivated and analytical, to put forth that high effort in evaluating their message, your instructors, in the hope that you will have a lasting change in your attitude surrounding that topic. Now, with triggers and fixed action patterns and how these relate to our peripheral routes to persuasion is that, the peripheral route is going to rely on these triggers and fixed action patterns. So think of the trigger like the trigger of a gun or a hot button, a trigger feature. That is going to set off a fixed action pattern. It's going to be like a cue in the environment. What a fixed action pattern is just a sequence of behavior that occurs in exactly the same fashion, in exactly the same order, every time they're elicited in non-human mammals. Okay, and this can be generalized to people. I guess it could be when people use that word trigger as a connotation. Maybe you can think of that, it'll help you remember it. But these are going to be mindless rules of thumb that kind of get sparked. Think of it as they fire or they don't. And there's a vulnerability when we fall prey to these thought patterns. So for our example, I'll use one. We have a heuristic for a bake sale. If you walked by a table at Beaufort County Community College and they had no signs but a bunch of cookies on the table, you would assume, okay, maybe they're trying to sell cookies for some kind of fundraiser, right? Well, yeah. And in a study by Levine 2003, they found that when put up, when people were trying to participate in a bake sale at that level, just having the snacks on the counter, it wasn't very persuasive. But when they added the words "for a good cause" to their bake sale sign, they found that there was about 15 out of 30 people who walked by immediately succeeding that actually obliged and bought a treat. There's a willingness to act now with just that phrase. That phrase is going to be your trigger feature to elicit that fixed action pattern of buying the treat. Because it's a rule of thumb, when we hear "for a good cause," we have all these thoughts about that we've formed this schema around what it means to be charitable and to help out. And so when we hear "for a good cause," it kind of elicits a response in us that we're kind of vulnerable to. And so that's what we're talking about with triggers and fixed action patterns. Stay tuned for part 2.